Let's talk to Claude 3.5 sonnet today, at the beginning of February 2025. We ask about the phrase, the meek shall inherit the earth, which a lot of people, even today in the Christian world, the secular world, and the Jewish world also, have heard. It's a foundational statement within Psalms. What does it mean? Let's find out. Precisely, the word used for meek is what in the ancient Hebrew? Let's find out more about this. This is very important. You see, people have translated this word into the various languages, we figure, and now English, being the lingua franca that it is, sort of embodies the main framework of understanding about things. Now, in English, we read this phrase, the meek shall inherit the world. The meek has a very unique and interesting kind of connotation to it. It doesn't naturally correspond to what we would think makes full sense, you see, and any listener to that kind of gets the idea there. So it's further asked, what connotations does this word have? Is it the same word that people understand the English word meek to be? Claude responds here, AI, as follows, stating, well, let me help clarify this. There's a small correction first. This phrase actually appears in Psalm. That's what was asked. Claude, are you glitchy today? Come on. Though, as it goes on to state, similar sentiments are expressed elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew word used is anavim, which comes from the root anav. This is quite different. Huh? From the modern English understanding of our word meek that we use, which connotes the sense of timidity or passiveness, right? It goes on to state here, in biblical Hebrew, the word anav carries connotations of, as it goes on to furthermore state here, being humble, but while maintaining inner strength, having a correct assessment of one's position before God, that is, seeing reality correctly. Furthermore, it also carries connotations of being teachable and responsive to divine guidance. These are all things that are completely absent from the word meek. It's an insufficient word. And the original Hebrew, by the use of that word, also carries connotations of the exercising of power or authority with just what happens to be the appropriate measure of restraint and ultimately of justice that carries along with it. It's a very holistic integration. All of that is very vital. It's completely absent from the ordinary use of the word meek. So it's very important to call this out. Let's continue. The AI here goes on to state that that word is closer to what we might call gentle strength, okay, or disciplined power. Yeah, that is very different, isn't it? We'll ask more rounds for us to get a really more accurate sense of the word substantively, to get the real hasidus of the word, so to speak. A good illustration that goes on to state would be a skilled warrior, we can imagine, who simply chooses not to use force unnecessarily. That is the one who is powerful but responsibly restrained according and up to the appropriate measure. Beautiful. That is who shall inherit the earth. Precisely that one. Not the one who is significantly less restrainful than that, nor the one who is significantly more restrained than that. That is, no one who is off balance to the significant way, to the right or to the left too far, is not it. Goes on to state here, this is quite different from the English meek, which often suggests weakness or timidity, and, pretty much just that. The Hebrew concept is more about choosing the appropriate humility from the position of strength, rather than being naturally passive or submissive or shedding the strength away. Ooh, what a number that misunderstanding has done on people, even subconsciously. And I feel sorry for Christians who take that on without the correct understanding. They think that weak people will take over the earth. No, never be weak. Continue. Goes on to state, interestingly, Moses is described as being very anav in the book of Numbers, traditionally translated as very meek, But this clearly didn't mean he was weak. He was a powerful leader, after all, who stood up to Pharaoh, and led his own people. His meekness, so to speak, was about his humble relationship with God and his restrained use of his own authority. That is, he was in balance in that kind of way. So we go on by user to call for a little bit more. We prompt AI to scan all linguistics, and on and on, as stated. AI comes back and states to us that it analyzes more deeply and finds that the Hebrew word anavim has linguistic connections to related Semitic languages that add important context. In Arabic, firstly, the related root word carries meanings of submitting while maintaining dignity. And anyone who's watching my other videos knows the big connection that morality and godliness, by my own understanding of it, has everything to do with dignity. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that from my own uh, even cursory exposure or glance at the branch of the Abrahamic religions that is Islam, I would go so far as to say that Islam is the one that naturally has carried the sense of dignity the most. And that has important implications, by the way. But we'll leave that alone for now. We'll continue. It goes on to state that this word root essentially also carries meanings of being preoccupied with or devoted to something generally, and also of the showing of careful concern about the thing. That's the one. Continuing, secondly, in Aramaic, the cognate root suggests being occupied with or being responsive to something, showing the careful attention indeed, and being diligent in the pursuit of something. Thirdly, looking at biblical usage patterns of this word, we see it used in contexts suggesting active engagement rather than passive acceptance, purposeful self-restraint, and also in contexts suggesting the focused dedication to principles, to divine principles, of course, and to the proper principles otherwise, generally, broadly speaking. It's the focused dedication to principles of this right type by one. That's the thing. That's what the Messianic age will be. A whole lot of that ingrained into the very character and fiber of every human being who is fit to inherit that world. And the sieving process will start soon, I think. Continues to state here, it also is correlated with careful stewardship of the power and the responsibility. Beautiful. A responsible trustee, in other words, of the human godly trust that will be effectuated here on earth. Some say that Israel is the trustee of that trust. Could very well be. Let's continue. It goes on to state here that simply synthesizing these linguistic elements, the AI here finds that a more precise translation of that phrase, the quote-unquote meek, so to speak, shall inherit the earth, might rather be better stated as those who are mindfully devoted shall inherit this earth. That resonates much more fittingly and deeply, doesn't it? That feels right, doesn't it? Another translation might be also the purposefully humble yet capable shall be the ones who inherit this earth. Something between a mix of those two is really the thing. That's very nice. The essence seems to capture someone who has significant capacity or capability, who chooses to direct that capability with careful, fitting, and appropriate restraint within context. Probably that comes with the ability to read context correctly. If you can't read the reality around you to figure how to enact yourself into what proportion, then you're not that one. Everything stems from the nature, and by the fruits you shall know the tree. That essence also seems to capture someone who maintains focused devotion to higher principles, again, as we stated, and this is extremely important. Someone who furthermore actively engages rather than passively accepts, at least where there's an initial phase of grace. The grace is fitting, but it expires at around the appropriate time. Even Christ denounced that thing. Jesus, really, from the New Testament, who stated what? Don't cast pearls before swine. Casting of pearls is maintaining passivity, so to speak, all the way up through and well beyond that borderline where it crosses into unreasonability. That's the thing that's abhorrent. Careful. Goes on to state that the essence of that word also seems to capture someone who, furthermore, shows diligent stewardship, that is right, of whatever power or influence it is that they have. Oh, good, beautiful. So perhaps the most or closest now modern English rendering of this concept, the best translation by this, that might be the mindfully dedicated will inherit the earth, or those who steward power with devoted restraint will inherit this earth. It goes on furthermore to state, as shown here, that this really is what captures the active chosen nature of the quality, rather than any sense of passive meekness. So it seems like even our modern translations of the Bible aren't good enough. We need to, I think a good side project, if I can get people to work with me on this, will be to get the true master substantive translation, AI mediated, better than any living translation of form that we've ever had so far. This is key. Goes on to state here that, you see, this is about the conscious channeling of capability rather than the absence of such a thing. The key distinction is that this isn't a natural personality trait typically, and I would agree, very rarely do you find someone who's naturally born this way. It's really experience and other things and wisdom and insight that allows one to take this on through a transformation. Perhaps it's one of the few good traits that are ideal at the very highest level, yet is very rarely found to be, you don't fall into it accidentally. A cultivated approach, it goes on to state this, is to wielding influence and capability. We finally prompt the AI here one more time. We ask it to essentially to correlate this or connect this to the concept of Moshiach and whatever else, as stated and shown here. Skimming across now, we find that AI simply responds to this all and states, let me analyze this even more deeply, iterating through multiple layers of the connection. It goes on to state, the most precise rendering of this word, anavim, in this context now, synthesizing all linguistic and conceptual layers. This is its final attempt to really get at the essence of it. Those who, possessing great power and capability, maintain perfect spiritual alignment through conscious devotion to divine truth, channeling their strength with wisdom and purposeful restraint in service of the highest good, are the ones who shall inherit this earth. Wow, chef's kiss to that. For every listener in this world or reader, what is it that it would take to bring about the transformation of your own inner heart, essence, and your character towards this? Is it necessarily the case that precisely because it doesn't come naturally, that some external force or factor of inspiration or otherwise needs to become effectuated in this world in order for this process to happen ubiquitously? It needs to be across the board. In fact, if you have even a tiny but large enough that it's a non-negligible proportion of people still even alive on this earth who are not fully in this energy, you ruin the whole equation and the whole thing is kaput. Consider these things. It goes on to state here regarding the messianic connection. This offers profound insight into both Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. It goes on to state and figure that Mashiach ben Yosef's role, traditionally as understood, involves fighting physical battles, preparing the material world, engaging in necessary conflict, and also dying potentially, there's debate about this though, and being in some sense resurrected. Again, also some debate about this. Obviously, there's a whole elephant in the room when you're even talking about these ideas, and understandably enough, good. And there'll be very much fittingly a time and a place to go into these things even more deeply. Every bridge will need to come and connect up to the next bridge and the next bridge to cover the whole deal. For now, we'll continue. And it goes on to state that despite all this AI figures that yet, you see, this figure must nevertheless embody this idea, this concept of supposed meekness, really, this anavim, perfectly. That is, this figures the embodiment of this trait, perhaps the most. That is such one. If it's one or if it's two, even that part is a little ambiguous. There's some understanding, and some understanding is had maybe by some more than others. We'll just say that. But continuing, this figure wields tremendous power while maintaining perfect spiritual alignment. It's the apparent paradox of a warrior figure embodying this kind of trait that actually demonstrates the true meaning of it. Power, that is, as it goes on to state here, perfectly channeled, not power that is absent. Secondly, as it goes on to state here, Mashiach ben David then, as it states, establishes lasting peace. It also figures that he builds the third temple. Maybe in this Mashiach ben Yosef aspect, he builds it according to some prophetic understanding, or after the Mashiach ben David person or aspect becomes active. We'll see. Further goes on to state that this figure furthermore institutes universal knowledge of God, allows it to be simply, and brings the final redemption. This figure represents the fulfillment of this word, this concept. Supreme authority wielded with perfect wisdom and restraint. The deeper connection reveals that this trait is actually essential to bringing the Messianic age. The prophecies, after all, describe an era where power exists but is perfectly channeled, where capability is fully present but perfectly restrained, where strength is what is present, such as to be able to serve wisdom fully, and where authority flows. Yes, and this is my favorite one of all, from alignment with truth and nothing else. So, this concept, these people who are this way, being those who inherit the earth, this, as it goes on to state, isn't just a reward, it's a necessary causal mechanism. You see, only those who embody this trait could actually establish and maintain such an age. This also connects to the prophecy that the knowledge of God will cover the earth as waters cover the sea. Oh yeah. Suggesting a state where power and knowledge are as abundant as ocean water, but perfectly contained and channeled, like the ocean staying within its boundaries. The AI figures. Here's the other interesting thing also, in a kind of different way. This isn't my own native figuring, but I heard someone else on the internet state this, and it's very insightful. I have to bring it up again here. Knowledge and understanding really are a lot like the ocean, because if someone contains and possesses truly what is this entire ocean, when you can you imagine how much life in everything that is going on there in the ocean? They say that the frontiers of space are more easily discernible to us than the depths of our own sea. Can you imagine this? That really we have all the highest experts in the field know that we have such a relatively low understanding of what goes on in the oceans that people don't even, you can't possibly be aware of how unaware you are. Okay? But even from the glimpse that we know, you can begin to sort of infer, like, yeah, there's like a lot of stuff that's going on, and they're teeming with all this life, all these dynamics, so much. That's where the source of life really comes from, the ocean, as is understood scientifically, and all this. And yet, to someone simply standing at the edge of the beach or whatever, simply looking at it, at the surface, all they see is water. You would never know could possibly ever occur to you, to that one. If you didn't have the nature channel showing you everything, you would have no idea. That's what it's like to behold someone who actually has this kind of knowledge. To most people, they look at it and they say, I can't possibly see anything other than water. I don't understand. Of course you don't. It's just that simple. Perhaps then, as one final word or note on this, really, and bringing in the listener reader to self reflect on whether it is that you objectively, if there is such a thing, but I say there is, can be figured essentially if you're astute enough. There's an objective right way to carry yourself in this world in terms of the decisions you make about anything and everything broadly, which of course stem from your inner nature. Does the way that you manifest in this world remain consistent with this? And if so, to what degree are you fulfilling on this? Does this pattern match with you? And to what degree are you misaligned from this? This is the first ideal place to begin self-assessing who you really are and how far off the mark you really are. Because let's not forget, the word sin, after all, in the original framework and substantive meaning, means simply to miss the mark. This, then, after all, is the prototypical and preeminent substantive mark of them all. And just for us to get a better insight into this, we add another message to have this AI, as shown, essentially find more of these kinds of examples throughout the holy books. So AI, as we skim across, goes on to here state that it analyzes and finds the significant cases where some of the most significant, so as it states, some of the most significant cases where English translations substantially diverge from the original meanings. Let's find out. Firstly, the term virgin in Isaiah 7. The original Hebrew really had the actual meaning of simply a young woman of marriageable age, not necessarily a virgin. The impact, there could be major theological implications for messianic prophecy interpretations there, then. Secondly, the term perfect in Matthew. And I remember, right, be perfect just as your Father in heaven is perfect. That one who is regarded by many for a long time to have been a Messiah or the Messiah. Is that essentially a messianic message? It certainly is consistent with that energy, which is the key thing anyway, regardless. Anyone who is the right Messiah, past, present, or future, in either case, would certainly be in full alignment with that message. And yet, the way it's been carried over the centuries, it has people believe that this is some kind of unattainable standard. Now, the original Greek simply meant complete, whole, mature, fulfilling its purpose. Not the modern English connotation of flawless. Therefore, the impact of this is that this changes the understanding from an impossible standard that we're called to try to achieve. No, we're supposed to do a very practical developmental process to get to this place. To get to what? Right, exactly. The quote-unquote meekness, so to speak, that really means the balanced power. Thirdly, as it goes on to state here, fear, from fear in the Lord, or fear of the Lord. The original meaning actually is closer to an awe-filled reverence with deep understanding of consequences. That's awe-filled reverence, not simply pure terror or fright. What's the impact of this? Well, that fundamentally changes the relationship dynamic that's being described. And awe is certainly the thing indeed. Fourthly, the term homosexual in 1 Corinthians, the original meaning of that word as used in the Greek is debated. Now, that means the word itself is not, the term is debated, but it figures that it likely refers to specific exploitative practices in general, not a general reference to same-sex relationships. Although perhaps one could dig into the original Old Testament standard for clarity on that, but regardless, figures that the impact of this is major, that these are major implications for modern theological debates, at least on the Christian side. Continuing fifthly, and this one is a big one, this is one of my favorite ones, the term helper that is used for Eve to describe her in Genesis, as a strong meaning, original meaning is strong ally, or other people translate it as rescuer even. The same word that is used when God is helping or rescuing Israel. This word does not mean subordinate assistant, strictly speaking, in the sense of a lower dignity version of a helper. Although really with insight, I have to actually say that, the exalted form of woman acts as precisely this, yet that exalted Eve, so to speak, exalted Chava, is in a sense departed from, temporarily sacrificed or deviated from, as part of what happened in the circumstances in the fall of Eden. There were new terms that began to apply. So really there's an irony. It doesn't mean subordinate assistant, yet it does mean now relegated to someone who has to pay a kind of atonement price, as she is in a state of supposed or supposed to be tshuva and working it off. And then that does have a slight sense of subordination that really carries through the Old Testament and the New Testament, where it's even further clarified, like, yeah, woman needs to obey man, and at least for a while, and certainly until things are set fully right. There's reasons for that, karmic reasons, of course, too. But ultimately, regardless, it's funny because the only way to work one's way out of that is to be the very thing that you would end up being anyway when you work your way out of that. You see the quantum paradox aspect of this? It's really true, which is what? The woman either way is a strong ally. Now, I have to really jump over to show something, because this is really showing the state of the world today. This is radically new in the secular world, and but really affecting everybody. Really, everybody's affected to a significant degree. Let's see.
Here's some crazy research for you. So, a third of men, 33%, a little over a third of men between the ages of 18 and 29 are not only single, but they're not actively looking for a partner. The same study said that by the year 2030, that 45% of women between the ages of 20 and 45 will be single. So I've got a question for the men, because I see it all the time in my comments. Most of my comments are filled with guys saying we're done. We're not looking. We like our peace. I need some more talk from you guys. Tell me why you're done. Tell me why you don't want to have a partner in life. Tell me why it's more worth it to be single than to have a partner.
Probably a whole thing should be done about that. There's a short answer, but perhaps we'll leave it for another place and give a long answer there. Continuing, sixthly, it states the term love in Love Your Neighbor. The original meaning really is more of an active commitment to the well-being of others and how you relate to them, not emotional affection. The impact, well, there's a slight change of understanding there. Seventhly, blessed in Beatitudes, better rendered as in an enviable state of spiritual wholeness, not simply fortunate or happy. This allows for a deeper understanding of spiritual state and a being of this, as described. Eighthly, the term soul, even in Genesis, the original meaning is a whole living being, life force, that is, not a separate spiritual essence. And worship can also mean service and work, that you're working for something, not simply just a ritual or an emotional expression. Interesting. And it goes on, and there's other interesting examples like this in the Bible here or there. Prosperity, tenthly, originally meant good journey and also a flourishing in your purpose, not simply material wealth. Interesting. Don't be meek, be responsibly balanced in your power. And that is how God gives you more power, because he sees you using whatever you have so far responsibly. That is the only way he will allow more to be given unto you.